real history of the Radio Bean per se, but Radio Bean, when it started, it was certainly a shoestring operation, and did it all, as almost everybody here knows because they all know me, but I opened it up on credit cards, and the original Radio Bean was just this one room for the first 9 years of its life, and it was shoestring even then. And then we expanded into that room there, 10 North Winooski, in 2009 into 2010. And then in 2014 or 15, we went into the lamp shop. I guess I keep saying the word, but it's always been a shoestring situation here. And part of that is the nature of the business, that the music industry and kind of the way that this particular part of the music industry isn't necessarily very profitable all the time. And part of that is because of me, because I'm not like the most extraordinary business owner and manager that's ever been here. I'm not like, as anyone who's worked here could tell you, I'm not the person nickel and diming, all the time on things and not being like, hey, you got time to lean, you got time to clean, buddy, and you better, whatever, punch out or whatever. Just micromanaging is not my thing. And certainly the business could have forever been more profitable if I was a little bit more like that, which I'm just not, and I accept that, and that's why I've had managers doing that, effectively most of the time in the history of the Bean, and and so I don't know, just not my thing. So Radio Bean struggling financially is the point I'm making. A lot of that falls on me, obviously, as being the owner of the business, and not just the circumstances of the industry. Same thing with food. When we had Tuna Duende open, it was never really turning, a profit that, it made it. We're still here, and it was still running, but the nature of, or like the model that I had made wasn't really set up to be a very profitable restaurant, in the sense that the community that comes here wants local, organic, scratch food, but also doesn't have the resources, or a lot of people that would come here don't have the resources to pay the cost of what that would really be if you're marking it up to, industry normalities. Nobody wants to pay $25 for a cheeseburger, but they want a $25 cheeseburger, kind of thing. So I guess just on, on that same thing, it's just, I could have cut costs and, modified the menu to be smaller, done things, whatever, to make things better. That's me, and, and people who work here making decisions. But, so, this mic too loud for anybody? No? Good. Okay, great. So, now it's 2026, and as again, everybody probably realizes, but knows that we used to have a full kitchen open, full service restaurant pre-COVID. After COVID, I decided not to reopen the kitchen. I thought that maybe eventually I would reopen the kitchen, but especially in that time right afterwards, it was it was just so volatile. Like, even when I was looking into it, like, food prices were just so were so high. The labor costs of what the expected rate of pay for hiring a totally green line cook was $6-7 more an hour than it was pre-COVID, and I wasn't making money before, and I was like, there's no way I can like operate a profitable restaurant right now with how things are. And so I decided not to reopen the kitchen. And through over the last few years, I've definitely considered that deeply to try to do that again. And there's a lot of aspects to operating a restaurant that I miss. There's some things that I don't miss, obviously. But the additional community that can come in with that, there's kids, there's elderly people, there's just the whole range of things that aren't necessarily going to be here for bands at night when we open at 6 o'clock. So there's the larger community aspect of having food service is something that I do miss, and if I could have like waved a wand and had the resources to do it, I would have done it. But it's also a big push to hire the staff, get a chef that's actually on it and manages the food correctly and keeps costs down, and you got to buy all that inventory, whatever. All the things that it takes to like re-kickstart a food program. I didn't have that within me and like in my pocket to do it. So kitchen's been sitting there. What else? I think I'm going to kind of ramble and take lots of tangents, but you're all here, so so the model right now, obviously, is, people know it's like that, the Radio Bean functions on drink sales and ticket sales, like we take a cut of the door and we make money in the bar. Since COVID, that model has also taken such a shift in industry-wide, and lots of friends with I have lots of friends who own bars and music venues, and they've all seen the same trend. I think particularly at the Radio Bean, it changed quite a bit. That the median age went down like 10 years compared to what it was before COVID. I used to always think that it was like around 36 years old because we had so many people in their 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s coming here, and also obviously the college and younger contingency. And then when we reopened after COVID, especially the people who had turned 21 during COVID really wanted to come out and rage, and they came out in full force and packed the place like basically every night we were open when we first reopened, and vaccines had come out, whatever, all the things, and so they were ready to rage. Then as the former kind of like core block of regulars and stuff started coming around, people that were in their like 30s, 40s, 50s started coming back around. They'd walk in the door and be like, wow, I am too old and I outgrew this place. Like I've aged out of the demographic of the Radio Bean because it was just so full of 21-year-olds. And I was happy for them and everything too, but it definitely kind of scared a lot of people off in that way, and that also just changed the nature of the bar. Like we used to sell a lot of like $12 to $15-16 cocktails and stuff like that. That's not what people who are 21 are just buying, and we definitely would, we always sold a lot of High Life, but we sold a lot more High Life, and cheap drinks, and the cheapest drink and the cheapest beer is definitely like what everybody wanted. So that shifted. And yeah, and then, you know, without having the restaurant and being a venue, and also not, you know, being open during the day. The daytime was always kind of like never really profitable, even from the beginning. It was like almost like a public service to be open during the day. That there's just not a lot of like offices around here. There's not like, it's not like in the South End where people get a lunch break and they can go over to August 1st or something like that. And you know, and just whatever, you can just do volume like that. Or if you're on Church Street, there's just not that type of like, even though we're so close, it's so different right here. But lost my train of thought when I started talking about the daytime thing. But the yeah. So when did I start talking about the daytime? Anybody remember why I was talking about the daytime thing?
Profitability, daytime, nighttime.
What was that? Oh yeah. Just taking the shift so that, you know, I made a decision to be not open during the day because that wasn't that profitable. I was like, we're just going to be like a venue and do what we do well, and, you know, or that's the best that we can, and do that. And so now it's like, to get into the Radio Bean, there's almost always a cover, unless it's a special situation, but it's basically a $10 cover all the time. And that also changed because there was all this free time that you could come here during the day, and, you know, people that didn't want to pay a cover or whatever could come here during the afternoons, and there was a lot of free shows, especially when we had the restaurant. We, you know, have the tip hat and stuff like that for some of the earlier acts, and, you know, ticketed shows later on. But not having that free time to be in here also changed things. And I can say I did what I wanted to do then, but if I could go back in time, I would have opened earlier and then started doing the covers and keeping some of that daytime thing, whether that was opening at noon or 2 or something like that. Because there's a lot of community building that happens when you can just casually pop in and not have to pay $10 to get in the door. So I'm talking about all the ways that I've let you guys down. But and so again, just following loose threads here, but a lot of people think that, or saying like, oh, the Burlington music scene is like, it's dying or it's dead or something like that, and that is not true at all. And anybody that's around and participating in it knows that. But from an outside perspective, people might think that because Nectar's closed and whatever, and Skinny Pancake doesn't do music anymore, and whatever. There's lots of things that people can talk about, but the music scene in Burlington, and if you're close to me, you've certainly heard me say this, is arguably the best it's ever been. And there are so many great bands, and there's so many bands, and there's so many talented musicians in those bands. And also, a big meter for that, or a measure for that, is that not only are there great bands in Burlington playing in Burlington, but there's so many great bands in Burlington that are actually getting out of Burlington to go tour. And that's something that, people talk about the 90s, and they're like, oh, there's all these great bands in Burlington in the 90s. A lot of those bands never played outside of Vermont. Or if they did one time in New York at a friend's studio or something. And a lot of them never toured. There are exceptions, but there's so many bands in Burlington that have management and are getting, written up in magazines, and they're actually getting themselves out there and touring the country and internationally, and that's a big deal. And people all over the country know that there's a scene happening in Burlington. So, the Radio Bean and the Burlington venues, it's not because there's not a plethora of talent and, here. And also I can say that there's also, it's not like we're slow. you know, it's not like this is like some aging dinosaur of, you know, relic venue that doesn't have people coming here. It's like people come here all the time, and you know, I don't know how often all of you come here. I can see a lot of people that do, but there's a need, and there's people, and there's a line down the street often to get into shows here, but part of that, and you know, in the context of what I've already said, is that even when there's a line down the street and we're at capacity, that doesn't necessarily translate always to profitability. It's just people drink way less than they used to. Like if we had a packed bar, it was, you know, we would have 2 bartenders behind the lamp shop bar slamming drinks as fast as they could for hours and hours and hours pre-pandemic. Now it's like 1 bartender, room can be packed, and sometimes they're busy, but sometimes they're like, you know, just jamming, and that's fine. I mean, you don't want to be like, you know, whatever, pushing drinks on people, but it's just the nature of drinking has also just changed so much, and it's, you know, statistically proven that, you know, younger people are just drinking less than they did, and good for them. But doesn't mean the bar makes money, and that's how the bar, you know, again, like talking about how the industry has shifted so much in the last 5, you know, basically since COVID, is that model of you fill the room, you're making money. That doesn't really work that way all the time. It depends on the show too. Sometimes there's certain bands, or especially if it's like a band that brings out, you know, Gen Xers, they drink. You know, they tip. They open a tab, but it's just different than it used to be. And you know, another thing about the Bean, you know, and this is something that, you know, I really cherish about it, is, you know, the songwriter shows and this venue for acoustic performances. Those are real, you know, money losers. A lot of them, even when it's a sold out show, and you know, people come in, maybe get a drink, sit in the chair, and it's like this, you know, the bartenders are back there standing because everybody's paying attention to me, and that, you know, again, people think, yo, Bean's doing great, you know, when like there's like, you know, $100 in sales on a whole night or something like that, because it's a magical night, but it's not really like a profitable situation. And yeah, so insurance, yeah, the insurance thing is crazy. It's like, and I looked at it recently in, I think it was in 2018, I was paying like $8,500 for a insurance policy for the place, and in 2025 into 2026, it's $69,000. You know, so it's like, that means like, you know, not that I've ever made that much, but it's like, you know, whatever. If that was out of my income, you know, so I'm like, yep, I'm just making like $50,000 less than I used to make or whatever. And that is a huge problem. And there's basically one insurance company that insures most of what places like this in Vermont, because of the Vermont laws related to liquor liability are so strict, and the consequences and the potential payouts are really high and whatever. So they have a monopoly, and they can basically set the price or you're out, you know, and just the way it is. If you're, it's different if you're a brewery, or you have like other things like that, then you can get different types of insurance because you're getting a policy for all this stuff. But for a place that's a venue, like Radio Bean, Monkey House, Wallflower, basically almost every bar in Burlington, we all have to use the same one company. They just keep raising the price $20,000 a year. It's crazy. And yeah, I mean, there's multi-truths to that.
I have to go to a band practice, and tracking so carefully what you're saying. Gen X. My name's Shauna Hill, but
Yeah.
people know me as Gen X. And I've been researching for about a year and a half with some other folks in this community what's going on in the venues, because for 20-something years I was a nonprofit executive, but I'm from here, but I worked in Seattle for 15 years. And early in my career, there was an all-ages dance band in Seattle. This is like in the 2000s, where because of that, nonprofits got involved in the music scene. And because any place that had a liquor license couldn't host all-ages shows, is how that started. But the long and the short of it is that we've been looking at, essentially, businesses are far more agile than nonprofits are at doing anything in terms of your ability to move and make decisions and be flexible and be responsive.
Yeah.
And because I was a nonprofit executive for so long, I think like a nonprofit executive. And there are a lot of opportunities in Vermont for partnerships that involve things like grant funding, using daytime space in the summer for youth camps, teach kids how to fucking do sound, whatever, shit like that.
Yeah.
That I've been researching to create essentially alternative business models, because I don't think the business model works, and I don't think it's you. Like, maybe you could have been better at this. I'm sure you could have. I've run 2 businesses. I'm sure I could have been better at them as well. But when you think like a nonprofit executive, which means you always have the money ahead of time. You know what your budget is, even if it's inadequate, right? So the money is there before you spend it.
Yeah.
And the way you plan and the way you think, right, is around those limits, as well as contingencies, right, partnerships, things like that.
Yep.
And one of the things that was clear when, and I talked with everybody from, like, I don't know if Dennis is here, Dennis Wegman from Toast, I talked to Brian Nagel, I talked to folks all over town. This is before Arts Right closed again, before Nectar's went down, and before Despacito. And I was saying, what would work in this town, I wasn't thinking of Radio Gate, but what would work in this town, right, is you need to really be creative about how does a business become resilient, frankly, in a moment where the economics are going to continue to be inconsistent and unpredictable. Your labor costs, your cost, how much people are drinking has plummeted, which from like a public health standpoint, it's like, yeah, youth are drinking less. Like, they're not doing the Gen X thing, but like, nightmare for venue, right? And so I've been working that problem with some other folks, and I want to sort of offer in general. I'm disabled now and I'm a full-time musician now and I don't do that shit anymore. But I'm completely available to consult, to work on solutions for this specific place. And the reason is because that outside thinking, right, going back to the drawing board, what are the alternatives, things that you would never think would bring revenue to a venue space, right, that are easy, that are secure, that are guaranteed, right, that are not about how many people show up or how much they spend that night. Every tiny source of funding that you have about that is like a piece of cornerstone underneath the business that brings your stress down, right, and helps sort of create agility. And what I'm hearing you say, and kind of what I expected you to say, is there's just not any fucking agility, there's not consistent profitability. And that's what everybody's told me in the last 18 months that I've been having this conversation. And so my thought was, and the reason I showed up here tonight, even though I gotta go to band practice, I was supposed to be at a meeting where I was like, I gotta go to this. Because the reason I even care about it, I mean, the music is amazing, we all know that. Like, I fucking love being here, we all wanna be here. But the reason it matters to me as somebody who was, a nonprofit exec, a clinical and executive social worker who eventually became a resilience science consultant, is because third spaces like this are the resistance. And I mean that very literally. Like, when my health collapsed for the 3rd time a few years ago, and I was like, I can't see well enough to use computers well, and I was like kicked out of my career basically overnight. I came to the Elliott Smith night a couple of years ago and sang some songs with folks and plugged back in a little, but I hadn't been in this town since the 90s, so I didn't have an attachment to Radio Gate. I was like in Seattle that whole time. But I ran an all-ages youth venue out there for years, and it was part of a nonprofit design. And one of the things that I think will work here is some version of looking to diversify using the use of space and partnerships. And this is things like, it doesn't even have to be a huge amount of money, right? A grant from the Arts Council, a grant from the school district, a grant from here and there that allows somebody to come in here on Sundays and teach a bunch of kids how to do something, right? That a lot, like some use of the space that doesn't really require a lot of stuff. So I don't know that, like, you know, we could talk about the details of that solution,
Yeah.
but what I wanted to say primarily is there are some folks who've been really working this problem, and what I want you to hear is the fucking business model doesn't work, and I don't even know that it will in a second, right? Because we don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you
Right.
said, and I want to pause you, and
Sure.
I'm happy to like keep
Sure.
conversation going and everything. I want to get through this part right now, but I appreciate everything you just said. I know you got to
I want
go.
you to feel validated, and I have to leave. I want you to feel validated.
Thank
That's
you,
all.
and
And I wanted you to see.
I agree with
guess I wanted to
everything
say,
that you said.
Again, my question is, I'm gonna leave and I wanna be thinking about this,
Yeah.
right? You guys all know, you can find me on Instagram, track me down, and I'm
Yeah.
in this conversation. The reason I'm here, like, I will show up, I will work for free for this place, I will help solve any problem, is because I don't think the solutions look like the previous business solutions, right? I think we have to be so creative and tenacious.
I agree.
And my question for you was, in terms of the lease, the brand of it, like in terms of like if the business was going to be purchased or something, like are you in a longer term lease here, right? What are the sort of factors, like theoretically if you just closed up shop, would it go away tomorrow, or are you in a commitment to it? And the reason I ask that is because when Arts Right closed the second time with those new owners, the model had been that the lease was a long-term lease and somebody was supposed to come in and like finance that long-term lease. That isn't what ended up happening. But I didn't know if you have some sort of long-term commitment and if that's part of the financial challenge.
I want to get into all of this stuff,
Sure.
like in the details of that. I don't know. I guess it's breaking the format that I laid out
I'm sorry.
initially to get into it. But you know, I guess to you know, whatever. I don't know what else I was gonna say. I was just up here meandering. But so the Brady Beans in November would be ending one of its 10-year leases, and the property owners are ready to like, you know, they know that I am doing this obviously, and whatever the new situation is, they're you know ready to do on the same terms that I have, like another 10-year lease for the space. So the
What's the current rent?
current rent for everything is about $6,500, which is actually pretty good. It's really not bad. It's not bad. You want to try to get a $6,500 lease on Church Street? You're talking like a closet, you know. So
What's your
that includes Seagull. Yep. Yep.
what's your breaking?
That really varies so much depending on it's hard to define that because it depends on the types of shows. It depends on you know how much staffing we have to have for those things. But the yeah, so it's hard to completely define that. Yeah, so that's I guess answering your question about the lease. I guess I don't know what else I was going to say. Maybe I'll just come up with other things to say. Feel free to ask. We'll open up the Q&A. Brian.
I guess the question is sort of like, you know, we got here. Like, what are your hopes and dreams? Like, what do you feel like looking towards the future? Like, how do you see this playing out? Like,
Well, yeah. So.
Wait, Lee, could you give him the mic so we can all hear?
Oh, yeah, sure.
sorry. You could just repeat it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Sorry. I just said we have some context for how we got here, and I'm very curious about what your hopes and dreams are, and how we can help, and what the permutations are. And, you know.
Thanks, Dan. I was gonna say we need to get a second ballot.
Yeah, fix that right now too, please.
Yeah. So I mean, I said this in the post a little bit, and I know you only get so many words to put in there, but it is certainly my hope that the space itself continues to operate as a live music venue. And I'm not attached to how that exactly is. And you know, the news was asked. You know, reporter asked me the question. You know, and it's like that this place as a community resource is so valuable, you know, beyond what it means to me and what it means to anyone that's in this room. It matters to so many people, that both in Burlington and the regional touring bands and everybody, that it is just, it's too important to not continue to be that. Again, I can see how if, you know, the right group of people come up and, you know, have, you know, an idea, that I could see it evolving in ways like how the programming is and everything. But mostly I see it just happening more, that, you know, the Lamp Shop's not having shows, you know, all the time in there, and that room is underutilized for sure. The whole space is underutilized, really. Like, I mean, it really is. There's so much space in here, and you know, with, again, like with you're talking about like high school program, and I had mentioned that around the 25th birthday, that, like, you know, that with 242 no longer being there could be tons of like high school bands playing in here during the day. One thing I can say about the, you know, the building owner is that they have been incredibly accommodating to having a loud as fuck music venue in a commercial apartment building. That is, you know, so it's like, whatever you want to say about the, like, you know, landlords and stuff like that, they have been so accommodating to this space for that, and they want this to continue, which is amazing, and they don't have to. They could easily have been like, no, you know, you can only have acoustic music, or you have to have it done by 9 o'clock or whatever, and it's loud, you know, and so that is something that I know if that, I was worried when COVID got over and we reopened, and it wasn't a problem for a little while, but it was that it had been so quiet for like a year and a half, that I was like, this is never going to be able to start back up again. I was like, there's no way. All these apartments have flipped over, and when first night at Taka, like, people are going to come down here with, like, you know, pitchforks, and it was, you know, people transitioned out of here that didn't want to live above a music venue, and, you know, and then whatever. But I know that if it goes away, nobody's going to be able to come back in here after a pause like that again and start being loud and so heavily, you know, because it really does affect the building a lot. Anybody, I know some of you have lived in this building, and you can hear it. You know, it's an old building with timbers, and it just resonates through the building. But keeping it going, then it's always been here. And that's something when somebody moves in the neighborhood and they're like, it's loud. I'm like, well, it's been loud for 25 years, so, you know, welcome. You know, because if it stops being loud, then I don't think it'll ever be allowed to be loud again. And that's unique. So, to answer Ryan's question even more, it's like, I can see myself being involved. I still love this place. I still love, yeah, I mean, it's whatever. It's been my thing, as you know, and I put a lot of attention into it. I put a lot of, you know, love into it. But I know that it's a fact that I can't do it the way I've done it and do it as, you know, alone, basically. Not that I'm alone. I mean, Lena's amazing, Zach's amazing. Everybody who works here is amazing. And, you know, so I'm not doing it alone by any means right now, but as the sole owner and, you know, person, then I am in that boat. And at the end of the day, it's like, it comes down to me making it swing. And it's hard to make it swing. I mean, it's like, I mean, I just saying it's too straight thing. It's like, you know, the radio meeting's open right now, the lights are on, and it's like, but like, I hustle like basically every single day, and I'm pulling some rabbit out of a hat to make sure that it stays open and that it doesn't seize. And that is exhausting, I guess is, you know, a word for it. It's also just, you know, when I can feel it in my body, especially the last couple years, it's been so like, And, you know, at times, like, oh, it's been a good couple months or whatever, and, you know, make a couple improvements or whatever, but it's just literally impossible for me to do it the way I've done it. And so, whether that is a cooperative or it's a group of people that, you know, want to come in and co-own it, or, you know, and become partners in it, that's a possibility. And maybe that's with me still involved. I think I can see that happening for sure. But also, if somebody comes in and it's like, here, we have these great ideas, here's our plan, I get to know them, or maybe I already know them, and I believe in them, and I believe that their intent is good and beneficial, and they're gonna keep the music going and everything like that, and they're like, but we'd like you to take a hike. I could be okay with that. Like, it doesn't, I don't have to be involved. That's what I said, it's not a prerequisite. That's what I wanted to say. It's just like, I don't have to come with the sale, you know? I think there's a lot of benefit to me being here. I do. I mean, in my heart of hearts, yes, I want that. It's like, it's been, I mean, whatever, I built this thing, you know, it's like, it'd be hard to walk away, you know, it would, as I think anyone who knows me knows. But, you know, I don't know, I already said it, so.